Sergeant Crickstar had been training military recruits for 17 cycles, and he thought he'd seen every species the galaxy had to offer. Forearms crossed over his chitinous chest, he watched the latest batch shuffle off the transport vessel onto station. Gamma 7. The Galactic Defense Force called them recruits. Crickstar called them statistics waiting to happen. "Welcome to Station Gamma 7. His voice echoed like thunder through the metal bay. "I am Sergeant Crickstar, and for the next 12 weeks, I will be your instructor, your mentor, and quite possibly your worst nightmare." His secondary eyes scanned the group with practiced efficiency. 3 methane breathers, who looked like a strong wind would scatter them. 2 gelatinous blorbs, already leaving slime trails on his freshly cleaned floor. A cluster of chitin folk, who might last a month if they were lucky. And then there was the human. Crickstar's secondary eyes twitched involuntarily. The last Death Worlder he'd trained had put 3 instructors in the medical bay during week 1. This one stood barely 1.5 meters tall, with copper-red hair pulled back in a ponytail and a spray of freckles across her pale face. She wore the standard gray jumpsuit 3 sizes too big, and she was smiling. Nobody smiled on their first day. "You!" Crickstar barked, pointing one of his right arms directly at her. "State your name and homeworld." The girl's smile somehow widened. "Amber Collins, sir." "From Earth, sir." "Specifically Ohio, but I figure that doesn't mean much to you, sir." Crickstar took 3 heavy steps toward her until his shadow completely engulfed her tiny frame. "Let me make something abundantly clear, Recruit Collins. I do not care if you come from a Class 12 Death World. I do not care if your species thinks lifting heavy objects makes you warriors. Here on my station, you are nothing but another recruit who will follow orders, learn discipline, and hopefully not wash out in the first week like the last 7 humans I trained. Do I make myself clear?" It was a good speech. He'd practiced it. The bit about 7 humans was technically a lie. It had only been 5. And 3 actually graduated, but she didn't need to know that. Amber Collins looked up at him, still wearing that infuriatingly cheerful smile. "Crystal clear, sir." "Looking forward to it, sir." Then she cracked her knuckles. The sound echoed through the bay like gunshots. Pop dash pop dash pop dash pop dash pop. Every alien recruit within 3 meters flinched. One of the blorbs retreated 1/2 meter, leaving a panicked slime trail. The chitin folks' antennae went flat against their heads. Crickstar felt his secondary eye twitch again. This was going to be a long 12 weeks. Day 1 orientation was usually Crickstar's favorite part of the training cycle. Watching hope drained from young recruits' eyes as they realized what they'd signed up for. After 17 cycles of this job, you took your entertainment where you could get it. "Listen up," he announced, gesturing with all 4 arms toward the massive facility stretching behind him. "Station Gamma 7 is a simulation facility. Everything you experience here is designed to test your tactical thinking, your problem solving, and your ability to not die in stupid and embarrassing ways." He paused for dramatic effect. "Notice I said simulation. That means this is all perfectly safe. We have foam weapons, stun settings on every piece of equipment, medical teams standing by for twisted ankles and bruised egos. We even have counselors for emotional trauma, because apparently some species find simulated combat too stressful." One of the blorbs made a gurgling sound that might have been relief. "The point is," Crickstar continued, "nobody has ever been seriously injured here. This is not actual combat. This is not war. This is training. And if you cannot handle training, you definitely cannot handle the real thing. Questions?" Amber Collins raised her hand. Crickstar's eye twitched. "Yes, Collins?" "Do we get to start today, sir?" Crickstar blinked all 4 eyes in sequence. "You want to start today?" "Well, yeah, sir. I didn't come all the way from Earth to stand around talking about foam weapons. No offense, sir. No offense. Like that made it better. Fine. Crickstar growled. Everyone to the obstacle course. Let's see what you're made of. The obstacle course was 15 kilometers of walls, rope climbs, balance beams, and crawl spaces, all while dodging simulated enemy fire from automated turrets shooting harmless light beams. Get hit by a beam, your suit buzzed, and you had to freeze for 5 seconds. Simple, effective, humbling. The goal, Crickstar explained, is to reach the far end without getting tagged more than 3 times. Use cover. Move tactically. This is not a race. This is an exercise in combat awareness. Begin. The recruits moved out. The methane breathers huddled together, moving from cover to cover with admirable caution. The Chitin folks split into 2 groups, providing covering positions for each other. The Blorbs were trying their best, leaving slime trails behind every barrier dot, and then there was Ember Collins. She treated the obstacle course like a playground at recess. While everyone else carefully climbed the first wall using provided handholds, she ran at it, jumped, grabbed the top edge, and vaulted over in one smooth motion. She was laughing, actually laughing, like this was fun. A turret spun toward her. She ducked, rolled, and came up running. Collins! Crickstar shouted into his cum. Use the cover. That's what it's there for. She waved at him, then parked over a barrier the others were hiding behind, using it as a springboard to launch herself toward the next section dot. This was not protocol. This was not doctrine. This was not how anyone in the history of galactic military training had ever approached an obstacle course. And yet, somehow, she was in first place. Crickstar watched in growing horror as she treated a rope climb like a speedrun, sliding down the other side and hitting the ground in a roll that should have hurt but apparently didn't. She took exactly 1 hit from the turrets, froze for her mandatory 5 seconds with genuine annoyance, then was off again like something caffeinated and feral. She crossed the finish line a full 2 minutes before the next closest recruit. Crickstar stomped over to where Ember stood, barely breathing hard, still wearing that infuriating smile. Collins, that was not how you run an obstacle course. Sorry, Sarge. Got excited. Won't happen again. Narrator's note: it absolutely happened again. By day 3, Crickstar had developed a twitch in his left secondary eye that his medical officer said was stress-related. Funny how that twitch hadn't existed before a certain human arrived on his station. Today was Urban Warfare Simulation Day. The recruits stood at the edge of a fabricated city block, complete with buildings, streets, abandoned vehicles, and enough holographic enemies to make any sane species think twice about their life choices. Crickstar launched into his speech, the one he'd given hundreds of times. Listen carefully. Urban combat is the most dangerous form of warfare in the known galaxy. Every corner is a threat. Every window is a sniper position. Every door could be your last mistake. He gestured at the fake city with 2 arms. This simulation uses holographic enemies equipped with sensors. They cannot hurt you. They can only tag you out. If you get tagged, your suit locks up and you are dead for the exercise. This is training, people. The holograms are not real. The danger is not real. What is real is learning how to not get yourself killed when it actually matters. The recruits nodded seriously. Most of them did. Ember was stretching her legs like she was about to run a marathon. Your mission is simple, Crickstar continued. Advance through the city block, clear each building, maintain communication with your team, and reach the extraction point on the far side. Slow and steady wins this exercise. Rushing gets you killed. Am I understood? Yes, sir, came the chorus of voices. Good. You will be divided into teams of 5. Collins, you're with the Chitin folk on Team 3. Try not to get them all killed in the first 30 seconds. That might have been harsh, but Crickstar was running low on patience and high on caffeine-equivalent stimulants. The teams moved into position. Crickstar watched from the command center, multiple screens showing different camera angles of the simulation. Team 3 advanced into the city. The Chitin folk moved with textbook precision, checking corners, covering each other's movements, communicating in short bursts of clicks and chirps. Ember moved with them, and for approximately 45 seconds, Crickstar thought maybe she'd actually learned something. Then the ambush happened. Holographic. Enemies materialized in windows and doorways, weapons flashing with simulated fire. It was a standard scenario designed to test how teams reacted under pressure. The Chitin folk did exactly what they were trained to do for cover. Returned suppressive fire. Started calling out enemy positions. Ember Collins did what Ember Collins apparently always did. Something completely insane. She charged directly at the holograms. Not toward cover near them. Not in a tactical flanking maneuver. Just straight at them, like she'd personally taken offense to their existence. "Collins!" Crickstar screamed into his comm. "Fall back. This is training, not a..." She crashed through a fake window. The sound of shattering prop glass echoed through the simulation as Ember, tucked into a roll, came up running inside the building, and somehow slid under a stream of holographic fire that should have tagged her. Out instantly. Her teammates stared in horrified amazement. Ember was laughing. Not nervous laughter. Not scared laughter. The kind of maniacal laughter you heard in action movies, right? Before someone did something spectacular and stupid. She flanked the entire enemy position from inside the building. Popped out a side door the holograms weren't watching. And systematically tagged out every single hostile from behind. While they were still focused on her team's position. The whole thing took maybe 20 seconds. Threat neutralized, Sarge. Ember's voice crackled cheerfully over the comm. "We're good to advance." Crickstar stared at the screens. All four of his eyes just stared. The simulation wasn't designed for someone who fought like this. The holograms had behavioral parameters, expected responses, tactical subroutines based on how normal soldiers operated. They didn't have a subroutine for insane human crashes through window and attacks from inside the building. Post-exercise debrief was tense. "Collins," Crickstar said, using every ounce of self-control not to scream. "What you did in there, in a real combat situation, you would have been killed. 17 times, minimum." Ember cocked her head to the side. "But I wasn't killed, Sarge. I won." "You," Crickstar sputtered. "You the holograms, it wasn't. But it did work, Sarge. Because it's not real." Crickstar finally exploded. "In a real scenario, with real bullets and real enemies who can think, you would be dead." Ember considered this for a moment, then shrugged. "Maybe, Sarge. Or maybe I would have won faster because real enemies don't respawn." Crickstar's left secondary eye twitched so hard it actually hurt. Week 2 broad. Crickstar's favorite exercise, the survival challenge. Finally, he would get to watch Ember Collins struggle with something. Combat simulations were apparently just playgrounds for Deathworlders. But survival? That required patience, resourcefulness, and the ability to handle discomfort things cocky humans who crashed through windows probably lacked. He was practically giddy as he briefed the recruits. "Welcome to Environmental Deck 7, he announced, gesturing at the massive biodome behind him configured to simulate a hostile planet environment. "For the next 72 hours, you will survive using only basic equipment and your training. This environment features moderate heat 30 degrees Celsius for you temperature-sensitive species, periodic rainfall, wild animals, and limited rations." The recruits looked appropriately nervous. Even Ember had stopped bouncing, which Crickstar chose to interpret as a good sign. "For most species," he continued, barely suppressing his smugness. This will be genuinely challenging. You will be uncomfortable. You will be hungry. You will question your life choices. But you will learn what it means to survive in less than ideal conditions. Questions? One of the methane breathers raised a tentacle. Is the environment fatal, sir? Of course not. This is still a training exercise. Uncomfortable, yes. Dangerous, no. Medical teams are monitoring all of you constantly. Now move out. He retreated to the observation center with his coffee equivalent and settled in to watch. This was going to be good. Owl 1. Most recruits were still trying to figure out where to set up camp. The Blorbs had found a shady spot but seemed confused about the concept of shelter. The Chitin folk were working together to gather materials. The methane breathers were already complaining about the heat. Ember. Collins had built a complete shelter. Crickstar blinked at the screen. That's not possible, he muttered. But there it was. A small but structurally sound lean-to made from branches, leaves, and parts of her equipment bag. She'd positioned it near a stream, under tree cover, with clear sight lines in multiple directions. It had taken her approximately 20 minutes. Hour 2, Ember had a fire going. What? Crickstar asked the empty observation room. We gave them minimal supplies. How does she have fire? The camera zoomed in. She was using something called a bow drill, a primitive human technique for creating friction-based ignition. She was also roasting edible plants over said fire, plants she'd apparently identified and gathered while everyone else was still setting up camp. By hour 3, other recruits were starting to struggle. The heat was getting to several species. The limited rations were causing anxiety. Standard survival exercise problems. Ember was offering to share her. Surplus supplies. Surplus. She had created surplus in a survival scenario designed to create scarcity. Why is she not suffering? Crickstar wondered aloud, pulling up her biometric data on a side screen. Heart rate, normal. Stress hormones, low. Hydration levels, optimal. Overall assessment. Subject appears to be in perfect health and is possibly enjoying herself. Possibly enjoying herself? Crickstar made a note to have the medical sensors recalibrated. Clearly, they were malfunctioning. Day 3 of the survival simulation brought the Predator event. The Predator was a mechanical construct designed to look vaguely threatening, make scary noises, and test recruits' ability to hide, avoid, and evade. It couldn't actually hurt anyone. It was just supposed to scare them and force them to use their training. Standard protocol. Stay hidden. Move away quietly. Do not engage. Crickstar watched the Predator activate and begin its patrol pattern through the biodome. The recruits would hear it soon, and then the fun would begin. Ember heard it first. Her head snapped up from where she was weaving some kind of basket, and she smiled. Oh no, Crickstar thought. That smile. He knew that smile now. That was the smile she had right before she did something that violated every regulation in the manual. Oh, cool, Ember said to herself, completely unaware she was being monitored. Dinner upgrade. No, Crickstar said to the screen. No, Collins, do not. She grabbed a sturdy branch she'd apparently been saving, tested its weight, and headed toward the Predator sounds. Someone get me a direct come to Collins. Crickstar shouted, but it was too late. Ember had already spotted the mechanical Predator, and instead of hiding like a sane being, she'd broken into a run. The Predator's sensors detected movement and turned to investigate. Its programming telling it to approach and trigger the recruit's fear response. What happened? Next would haunt Crickstar's dreams for cycles to come. Ember jumped on the thing's back, just launched herself through the air, and landed on a piece of expensive training equipment like it was some kind of recreational activity. The mechanical Predator made a sound that was definitely not in its programming, something between a confused whir and a grinding screech. Its balance sensors went haywire. Its threat assessment protocols couldn't compute what was happening. It had parameters for chase and intimidate. It didn't have parameters for Death Worlder tackles you from above. Ember was whooping with joy, hanging on to what passed for the machine's neck while it spun and thrashed trying to dislodge her. "Shut down!" Quickstar screamed at his technician. "Emergency shutdown now." The Predator locked up mid-thrash, and Ember rolled off it, landing in a crouch. Still grinning. "Ah, Sarge," her voice came over the comm. "I was just getting started." Quickstar stared at the screens. 4 eyes, all of them wide, all of them seeing but not quite believing. 2 simulations. She'd broken 2 expensive training simulations in 2 weeks. His left secondary eye wasn't twitching anymore. It had progressed beyond twitching into some kind of continuous spasm. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, humans weren't trained for war. Maybe they were born for it. And that, Quickstar decided, was absolutely terrifying. Graduation week arrived like an impending storm, and with it came the big scenario. Capital T, capital B, capital S. This was the simulation that made recruits wake up in cold sweats. The one with a 23% failure rate. The one that required everything they'd learned over 12 weeks of blood, sweat, and thoroughly violated safety protocols. Quickstar stood before the assembled recruits, feeling like a general about to send troops into actual battle. Which was ironic, because this was not actual battle, a fact he'd repeated so many times over the past 12 weeks that the words had lost all meaning. "This is it," he announced, his voice carrying across the staging area. "The culmination of everything you've learned. This simulation features multiple objectives spread across several kilometers of varied terrain. You will face coordinated enemy forces, environmental hazards, and tactical challenges that will test every skill you've acquired." He paused, making eye contact with each recruit. Well, eye contact with the ones who had eyes. The Blorbs got a general nod in their direction. "Work together. Think strategically. Use your training. And remember, this is still training." He wasn't sure why he kept emphasizing that last part. Probably trauma. Ember Collins raised her hand. Quickstar's eye twitched. Of course she had a question. "Yes, Collins? Is there a time limit, Sarge?" "Technically, no," Quickstar replied, wondering where this was going and already dreading the answer. "But the average completion time is 6 to 8 hours. The record is 4 hours and 22 minutes, set by Araxian Strike Team 3 cycles ago. Why do you cool? Cool. I'll be done in 1. Quickstar opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That's not. Oh, who am I kidding?" His internal monologue supplied helpfully. "She's going to do something insane, isn't she?" "The simulation begins in 5 minutes, he said instead. Because what else could he say? "Take your positions." The battlefield materialized around them, a massive holographic environment featuring enemy installations, defensive positions, patrol routes, and 5 separate objectives that needed to be completed before the final objective. The enemy command center could even be accessed. Standard strategy. Divide into teams. Tackle objectives simultaneously. Provide mutual support. Proceed with slow, methodical progress until all preliminary objectives were secured. Then and only then advance on the command center. It was a beautiful plan, elegant, time-tested, based on 3 million years of military, tactical evolution. Ember's strategy appeared to be, ignore half the objectives and run really fast toward the end goal. The simulation started. Recruits began moving toward their assigned objectives. Careful, coordinated, professional. Ember sprinted across open ground like someone had set her on. Fire and the enemy command center was the only source of water. Collins Crickstar shouted into the com. "What are you doing? You cannot just the objectives are Collins." Holographic enemies fired at her. Dozens of them. She should have been tagged out in seconds. Instead, she dodged. Not with any recognizable tactical movement. Not with proper evasion techniques. She dodged like someone who'd never been taught how to dodge, and therefore invented her own completely unpredictable method that involved random direction changes, spontaneous rolls, and at one point what looked like an actual cartwheel. The holographic enemies' targeting systems couldn't compensate. They were programmed to track standard movement patterns. Ember Collins did not have standard movement patterns. This is not, Crickstar sputtered. Watching the screens in disbelief, she reached the command center in 40 minutes. 40 minutes. The other recruits were still working on Objective 1, following the plan, doing everything correctly. The command center was supposed to be inaccessible until the shield generators were disabled. The anti-air defenses were neutralized, and the perimeter security was breached. That was the plan. That was the point. Ember looked at the heavily fortified door, looked at her foam weapon, looked back at the door, and then just kicked it. The door, not designed to withstand a direct kinetic impact from a Deathworlder wearing reinforced boots. Buckled. Inside, a holographic enemy commander looked up from his tactical display, his AI programming clearly confused. "You're supposed to disable the shields first," the hologram said, because apparently someone had programmed it with SAS. "Sounds boring," Ember replied, and tackled the hologram. The system didn't know how to process this. The enemy commander was a hologram. You were supposed to shoot it. You were not supposed to physically tackle it. That wasn't in the parameters. That wasn't in the code. That wasn't in any conceivable tactical manual anywhere in the galaxy. A hologram started glitching, flickering between solid and transparent, making sounds that definitely weren't supposed to be part of the simulation. "Emergency meeting." Ember's voice came over the comm. "Mission complete. Crickstar, 3 other instructors, 2 technicians, and 1 very confused AI ethics officer who'd been called in to determine if a hologram could file a complaint about being tackled, stood in stunned silence. Has anyone, one instructor asked solely, ever just disregarded the scenario design before? Silence. Technically, the head technician said, pulling up the mission parameters on a screen. The primary objective is to neutralize enemy command. All the other objectives are, well, they're listed as recommended. Recommended? Crickstar repeated flatly. It says, and I quote, "Neutralize enemy command through strategic completion of preliminary objectives, recommended approach for optimal success." They all stared at the screen. So she technically completed the mission? Another instructor ventured. Crickstar looked at the feed showing Ember Collins sitting on top of a glitching hologram, waving at the camera, while the other recruits were still methodically working through Objective 2. She had completed the mission in under an hour, by doing literally everything wrong. And yet, she had completed it. The realization hit him like a cargo hauler to the face. She'd been right this whole time. Not right in the way the manual was right. Not right in the way 3 million years of tactical doctrine was right. Right in the way that humans were apparently always right. Survival wasn't about following the rules. It was about winning. It was about winning. And if you won, the rules didn't matter. "Pass her," Crickstar said quietly. "Sir?" "Pass her," he repeated, louder this time. She completed the objective. That's what matters. His left secondary eye twitched one more time, then stopped. Acceptance, apparently, was the final stage of training humans. Graduation day arrived with all the ceremony and pomp that the Galactic Defense Force could muster, which honestly wasn't that much. But they tried. Crickstar stood at the podium, watching the recruits file in wearing their dress uniforms. The Blorbs had somehow managed not to leave slime trails on the ceremonial floor. The Chitin folks' carapaces were polished to a shine. The methane breathers had decorated their containment suits with their cultural equivalents of medals. And Ember Collins stood at attention in the back row, looking almost professional. Almost. There was still that glint in her eye that suggested she was one boring speech away from doing something regrettable. "Recruits," Crickstar began, "you have completed 12 weeks of the most intensive training the Galactic Defense Force has to offer. You have been tested, challenged, and occasionally terrorized. But you have survived. And now you will receive your assignments." He started reading from the list. Recruit Blore, Supply Chain Management, Sector 4. Recruit Zixtal, Communications Officer, Fleet Command. Recruit. Standard postings. Safe postings. The kind of assignments that meant you'd probably live to see retirement. Then he got to the end of the list. Recruit Ember Collins. He paused, letting the words hang in the air for dramatic effect. Special Operations Division, Rapid Response Team 7. The room went silent. Special Operations was where they sent people who were either incredibly skilled or incredibly crazy. Sometimes both. It was also where the survival rate was, well, let's just say lower than communications. Ember's face lit up, like someone had just told her she'd won a vacation to a war zone, which, technically, was exactly what had happened. After the ceremony, Crickstar found himself alone with Ember in his office. She stood at attention, waiting for whatever final words of wisdom he was supposed to impart. He looked at her for a long moment, all four eyes taking in this small human who had somehow turned his entire understanding of military training upside down. "Collins," he said finally, "I need to tell you something." "Sir?" "You were right." The words came out harder than he expected. "And I was wrong." She blinked, clearly not expecting that. "Sir, No, let me finish," Crickstar interrupted. "The training we provide here is designed for species that need structure, rules, protocols to survive. We teach them to think before they act, because if they don't, they die. But you humans," he paused, trying to find the right words. "You already have the combat software pre-installed, don't you? In actual combat, your instincts might save your life where our protocols would fail. You don't think about survival. You just do it. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes Deathworlders so terrifying on the battlefield." Ember's expression softened. "You weren't wrong, Sarge. You were just training different people. The Chitin folk need that structure. The Blorbs need those rules. I'm just wired differently. Doesn't make your way wrong. Just means there are multiple right ways." Crickstar felt something in his chest relax, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for 12 solid weeks. Maybe Deathworlders weren't arrogant. Maybe they weren't reckless. Maybe they were just operating on a completely different level. One that his species had never needed to reach, because they'd never come from a world that was actively trying to kill them every single day. Evolution was funny that way. Dismissed. "Collins," he said, managing something that might have been a smile. "Go break some real simulations in Special Ops." Ember snapped a salute, grinned, and headed for the door. Then she paused, looking back. "Thanks for not giving up on me, Sarge, and sorry about the 2 broken simulators." Crickstar's eye twitched, but it was almost fond now. Almost. 3? He called after her. "You broke 3 simulators, Collins." Her laughter echoed down the corridor as she left. Crickstar sat back in his chair, finally allowing himself to relax. 12 weeks. He'd survived 12 weeks of Ember Collins. He deserved a medal. Or a vacation. Definitely a vacation. A knock on his door interrupted his fantasy of a beach on a low-gravity planet. "Enter," he said wearily. His assistant poked their head in, holding a datapad. "Sergeant, The new batch of recruits just arrived. Thought you'd want to see the roster. Crickstar took the pad, scrolling through the names and species. Methane breathers, check. Blorbs, check. Chittenfolk, check. Wait, 2 humans. His left secondary eye started twitching again. I need a vacation, Crickstar said to no one in particular. Sir? His assistant asked. I really need a vacation, he repeated, staring at the names on the roster. Jackson Rivera and Priya Okonkwo. Somewhere in the distance. He could have sworn he heard the universe laughing at him. But you know what? If he could survive Ember Collins, he could survive anything. Probably. Maybe Dot. Oh, who was he kidding? He was doomed, Dot, but at least it would never be boring. And really, after 17 cycles of this job, boring was the real enemy Dot bring on the humans, he thought, setting down the datapad and pulling up the training schedule for the next cycle. Crickstar was ready. Well, as ready as anyone could be for training Deathworlders who treated war zones like amusement parks. 3 months later, Crickstar received a message on his personal terminal. It was from Special Operations Command, marked with Rapid Response Team 7's insignia. He opened it with a mixture of curiosity and dread. The message was brief. Sergeant Crickstar, thought you'd want to know Recruit Collins completed her first live combat mission yesterday. Enemy force of 40 hostiles, heavily fortified position, 0 casualties on our side. She breached the facility through an air vent nobody thought was large enough for entry, disabled their communications from the inside, and had the enemy commander in custody before the rest of the team finished their approach. Her after-action report consists of a single sentence. Same as training, Sarge, but with real bullets. Figured you'd appreciate the update. She sends her regards. Commander Thaxo, Division. Crickstar stared at the message for a long moment, then looked up at the ceiling of his office. You have a truly twisted sense of humor, he said to the universe. But despite everything, the broken simulators, the violated protocols, the continuous eye twitching, he found himself smiling. A genuine, all-4-eyes smile, because Ember Collins had proven something that 3 million years of galactic military doctrine had never quite understood. Humanity didn't need to be taught how to fight. They needed to be taught when to stop. And somewhere out there in the black, on a frontier world light years away, a small human with copper-red hair and an infuriating smile was showing the galaxy exactly what Deathworlders were capable of when you gave them a reason to fight and the freedom to do it their way. The universe, Crickstar decided, had a twisted sense of humor, but at least it kept things interesting. He looked down at the new roster on his desk, Jackson Rivera and Priya Okonkwo, and allowed himself a small chuckle. All right, then, he said to the empty office. Let's see what these two can do. After all, if humanity had taught him anything over the past 12 weeks, it was this. Never underestimate a species that evolved on a world designed to kill them. Because when you train warriors from a death world, you're not teaching them to fight. You're just teaching them which direction to aim. And that, Sergeant Crickstar thought as he prepared for the next batch of recruits, was both the most terrifying and most inspiring thing he'd ever learned. Some things, he decided, was something that might have been pride. Never changed, and he wouldn't have it any other way. The end.